He said he couldn't control himself. But why did he look like a man about to walk away instead of stay? "I can't control my feelings around you," he said, his voice low, uneven, as the fire cracked behind him. Snow pressed hard against the cabin walls, the wind slipping through the gaps like a warning. Her fingers were still caught in his, warm where they shouldn't be, and neither of them pulled back. The room felt smaller with every breath, like something was closing in or breaking open. Then his grip loosened, just enough to make her wonder what he would do next. "Tell me, would you have stepped closer or let him go?" The wind had a way of finding every crack in the cabin. It slipped under the door, whistled through the warped boards, and pressed cold against the back of Hattie Brooks's neck as she stood by the small iron stove. She pulled her shawl tighter, the wool rough against her chin, and added another split log to the fire. The flames caught slow, then steadied, casting a low amber glow across the single room. Outside, the high plains had disappeared into white. Snow drove sideways across the land, erasing the fence posts, swallowing the narrow trail that led down toward Dry Hollow. Nights like this, folks in town barred their doors early and kept their lamps low. Out here, there was no one to bar a door for you. Hattie reached for her tin cup on the table. The coffee inside had gone lukewarm. She drank it anyway, eyes drifting to the small shelf above the hearth, where a photograph sat beneath a thin layer of dust. She didn't touch it. Not tonight. The cabin creaked. Just the wind, she told herself. She moved to the door, pressed her palm against the wood. It shuddered under a hard gust. The latch held. She turned back, picked up her needle, and sat near the fire. The thread trembled slightly between her fingers as she pushed it through worn fabric. A shirt that had already been mended twice. It would last one more winter if she was careful. The wind rose again, louder this time, and beneath it, something else. A dull sound. Faint. Not the wind. Hattie froze, the needle hanging midair. There it was again. A knock, weak, uneven, like a hand that couldn't quite lift. She set the cloth aside slowly, reached behind the door for the Winchester. The wood was cold, familiar in her grip. She stepped closer, boots quiet against the floorboards. "Who's there?" she called, voice steady enough. The wind answered first. Then low, broken, a sound that might have been a man trying to speak. Hattie's jaw tightened. Nights like this didn't bring good things. Not bandits, not drunks. Nothing that knocked on a door in a storm meant trouble had already found it. The knock came again. Softer now. She lifted the latch a fraction, just enough to crack the door. The storm hit her face like a slap. Snow stung her eyes. She leaned into it, peering down. A man lay half against the threshold, one shoulder dark with blood. Coat torn open. Snow crusted along his collar and in his hair. His hat had fallen somewhere behind him, already buried. He stirred when the door moved, barely. Lifted his head an inch. "Help." The word came out thin, scraped raw. Then he sagged forward again. Hattie stood there, the rifle raised, but not aimed. The wind pushed harder, shoving the door against her arm. This could be a trick. Men had used worse to get inside a place. She watched for movement, for a second man, a shadow, anything. There was nothing, just the storm. And the man, breathing shallow against her doorstep. Her grip tightened on the rifle. "Don't move," she said, though he already hadn't. He tried anyway. A small shift. His boot slipped in the snow. He didn't get far. Hattie swallowed. The air burned cold in her lungs. She could shut the door. Bar it. Let the storm take what it would. No one would know. Her gaze dropped to the blood soaking through his sleeve, bright even in the dim light. A memory moved through her, quick and unwelcome. Cloth pressed against a wound, hands working fast before the warmth left. She let out a breath she hadn't meant to hold. "Lord, help me," she murmured. Then she lowered the rifle. The door opened wide. Wind rushed in, snapping the flame low in the stove. Snow spilled across the floorboards. She stepped out just enough to grab him under the arm. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight dragging at her shoulders. His coat was stiff with cold. "Up," she said, though he couldn't answer. He tried. For a second, his legs pushed, then gave. She pulled harder, boots sliding against packed snow, and managed to drag him over the threshold. The door slammed shut behind them with a hard crack that echoed through the cabin. Silence rushed in after it. Thick and sudden. Only his breathing remained. Rough. Uneven. Hattie stood over him for a moment, chest rising and falling. The rifle leaned against the wall within reach. Then she knelt. She pushed his coat aside. The tear at his shoulder was deep but clean. A blade, not an animal. Blood still seeped through, slower now but steady enough to matter. She moved without thinking. Kettle. Cloth. The small bottle of whiskey she kept for cold nights and worse ones. When the liquid touched the wound, the man jerked, a low groan breaking from him. His hand came up fast, faster than she expected, and caught her wrist. Hattie froze. His grip was strong, not steady, but desperate. Fingers digging in as if she were the only thing holding him to the world. For a long second, neither of them moved. His eyes opened halfway. Gray, clouded with pain, trying to focus. He didn't speak, just held on. Hattie looked down at his hand around her wrist, then at his face. "You're not dying here," she said quietly. She didn't pull away. After a moment, his grip loosened, slipped, fell back against the floor. His eyes closed again. Hattie stayed there, her wrist still where he had held it, feeling the place his fingers had been, as if the skin remembered. Then she picked up the cloth and went back to work. Outside, the storm kept moving across the plains. Inside, for the first time in a long while, the cabin held the sound of two people breathing. It took until morning for the wind to settle into something steady. Not quiet, just less wild. Hattie had not slept, not fully. She sat in the chair near the stove, a blanket pulled around her shoulders, watching the slow rise and fall of the man on her bed. Once or twice she closed her eyes, but each time he shifted, she was awake again before she knew it. At first light, she stood and poured water into the kettle. The metal clicked against the stove ring. The sound felt louder than it should have. He stirred. Not much, just enough to tell her he was still there. She didn't turn right away. Let the water heat. Reached for the tin cups, set them down on the table side by side, then paused as if noticing it for the first time. She moved one a little farther away. Behind her, the bed creaked. "You're in my house," she said, still facing the stove. "That means you don't reach for things you don't know." A beat passed. Then a voice, rough with sleep and pain. "I remember enough." She turned then. He was awake, propped slightly on one elbow, though it looked like the effort cost him. His face had more color than the night before. Not much, but some. His eyes found hers, steady this time. "Name's Luke," he said. She nodded once. "Hattie." "No last names." "Not yet." He let his head fall back against the pillow, breath slipping out slow. "You saved me." She poured the hot water into the cups. The steam rose between them. "You were dying on my step," she said. I moved you inside. That's all. He watched her for a second, like he might say something else. Then he didn't. She carried one cup to him, held it out. He reached, slower this time, careful with his left side. His fingers brushed the tin, then hers, just barely. Both of them stilled. It wasn't anything. Not really. Still, neither of them pulled away right off. Then he took the cup, and she stepped back. Drink, she said. He did. The rest of the morning passed in small things, the kind that don't seem like much until they're the only sounds in a room. Wood being split just outside the door, though she had told him not to get up. He did anyway. Came back in with an armful, breath tight, jaw set, like he wasn't about to be told again. She didn't argue, just moved the wood closer to the stove and stacked it neat. By midday, the light through the window had turned flat and gray. The storm still held the land in place. No tracks, no road, nothing but white out to the horizon. He sat at the table then, one hand wrapped around the cup, the other resting loose at his side. You always out this far? He asked. Yes. No neighbors? No. He nodded, like that answered more than it should. She took her seat across from him, picked up the mending again. The needle moved through cloth, steady, practiced. After a while he said, I'll leave once the road clears. She didn't look up. You'll leave when you can walk without falling. A corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. They let that sit. The second day, he was on his feet longer, slow steps from the bed to the table, from the table to the door. Each one measured, like he was learning the room by feel. He kept his distance. That was the thing she noticed. If she moved left, he gave space to the right. If she reached past him for something, he leaned back before she asked. No sudden movements, no standing too close. Men didn't always do that. By evening, the wind picked up again, rattling the boards like it had something to prove. The fire burned low. He looked at the floor, then at the bed, then back at her. I'll take the chair tonight, he said. She shook her head once. You won't. I've had worse. That shoulder hasn't. He started to argue. Stopped. The room felt smaller all at once. She stood, crossed to the bed, and pulled the blanket straight, then stepped back. It's wide enough, she said. You stay on your side. I stay on mine. He held her gaze for a long second, like he was weighing something he didn't want to name. Then he nodded. They lay down without another word. Back to back at first. Space between them that felt bigger than the cabin itself. The fire cracked. The wind pushed against the walls. The night stretched. Hattie stared at the dark wood in front of her, eyes open, listening. His breathing changed after a while. Slower. Deeper. She didn't notice when she shifted. Only knew it later. Morning came thin and pale through the window. Hattie woke to warmth she hadn't felt in years. Her cheek rested against something solid. Steady. She went still, his chest. His arm lay across her shoulder, loose like it had fallen there in sleep. Not tight. Not holding. Just there. She didn't move. Didn't pull away. The cabin was quiet, except for the fire settling low in the stove. After a while, he stirred. The arm lifted. Slow. Careful. As if he already knew. He sat up without looking at her. Reached for his boots. Fire's low, he said. She pushed herself upright, smoothing the blanket, though it didn't need it. Wood's by the door, she answered. That was all. No apology. No mention. But something had shifted, and neither of them could quite put it back. The storm eased on the third day. Not gone, but thinner. The wind no longer screamed. It dragged low across the plains, pushing loose snow in long, slow lines past the window. The sky showed through in places, pale and stretched. Inside, the cabin felt different. The same table, the same stove, the same worn boards underfoot. Still, nothing sat quite where it had before. Luke kept himself busy. He worked at the loose hinge on the back door, with a small iron tool he'd found near the shelf. Tightened it, tested it twice, then stepped away like it wasn't his place to stand there long. Hattie watched from the table, hands wrapped around her cup. The coffee had gone cold again. She didn't drink it. "You don't have to fix that," she said. "It was rattling," he answered, not looking at her. "It's been rattling for years." He nodded once. "It won't now." Silence settled between them again. Not empty. Just waiting. That afternoon, she brought out clean cloth and the bottle of whiskey. "Sit," she said. He did. Pulled his shirt loose at the shoulder, slow, careful. The bandage had soaked through again, though not as bad as before. She knelt in front of him. The light from the window fell across his skin, showing the line of the cut more clearly now. Red at the edges, but closing. She worked without speaking, hands steady, eyes focused. When the cloth pressed in, he let out a low breath, jaw tightening. "You're healing," she said. "Thanks to you." She didn't answer. Her fingers moved slower near the end, tying off the bandage. The knot didn't come right the first time. She adjusted it. His hand came up. Not fast this time. Not desperate. Just enough to stop hers. Hattie went still. His fingers rested over hers, rough and warm. Not gripping. Just there. She lifted her eyes. He was already looking at her. There was something different in it now. Not just pain. Not just gratitude. Something that hadn't been there the first night. Or maybe it had, and she hadn't seen it. "You should let go," she said quietly. He didn't. Not right away. "I tried," he said. Her brow drew in. "Tried what?" He let out a breath, slow, like he'd been holding it longer than he meant to keep things the way they were. Her hand shifted under his, not pulling away, not moving closer. "This is my house," she said. "I know. You don't stay here long enough to forget that." "I'm not forgetting." "Then let go." He looked down at their hands, like he might listen. Then he didn't. His voice came lower this time. Not forced, just honest. "I can't control my feelings around you." The words settled in the space between them. Hattie didn't move. The fire cracked behind her. A small sound. Too loud. "You don't know me," she said. "I know enough. That's not how this works." He shook his head once. "Maybe not." Still, there it is. Her throat tightened, though she kept her face steady. "Feelings don't change what's already been," she said. "I'm not asking them to." "Then what are you asking?" He didn't answer that. Not in words. His hand shifted, turning hers slightly, like he was testing if she would pull away. She didn't. That was all it took. He leaned forward, slow enough she could have stopped it. She didn't. The first touch was light, barely there. Then it wasn't. Something gave way. Not sudden, not wild, just a line crossed that neither of them had named until it was already behind them. His hand moved from hers to her wrist again, then to her shoulder, careful, like he still wasn't sure he was allowed. She let out a breath she hadn't meant to. The world outside the cabin fell quiet. Or maybe it just didn't matter anymore. When they pulled apart, it wasn't far, just enough to see each other. Hattie's hand came up, resting against his chest without thinking. She felt his heart under her palm. Fast, unsteady, like hers. "This doesn't fix anything," she said, voice lower now. "I know, it makes it worse." Probably. She let out something that might have been a laugh, if it hadn't caught halfway. "Then why?" "I told you," he said softly. "I can't pretend it isn't there." They stood like that for a moment longer. Then he stepped back. Not rushed, not abrupt. Just enough. His hand dropped to his side. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, breath uneven. "I shouldn't have done that," he said. Hattie stayed where she was. Her fingers still held the shape of where he had been. "No," she said after a moment. "You shouldn't have." Neither of them moved for a long time after that. Night came slow. They didn't speak much. Ate in silence. Sat across from each other like strangers who knew too much. When it came time to sleep, Luke took the chair without asking. Hattie didn't argue. The fire burned low between them. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the shift of wood, the quiet of his breathing from across the room. She didn't sleep, not really. Sometime before dawn, the chair creaked. She turned her head. He wasn't there. The door stood closed, the latch set, his coat gone. Boot prints marked the thin snow just outside the threshold, already filling in. Hattie sat up slowly. The room felt colder, like something had been taken with him. She swung her feet to the floor, stood, and crossed to the door. Her hand rested on the wood where he had stood 2 nights before. She didn't open it, just stood there, then turned back inside. On the table, near the empty cup, something small caught her eye, a piece of carved wood. Rough, simple, shaped like a horseshoe. She picked it up, turned it once in her fingers, then held it a moment longer than she meant to, and did not set it down. The storm broke the next day, not all at once. The wind dropped first, then the sky opened in long gray strips. Snow slid off the roof in heavy sheets, thudding against the ground. By noon, the world outside had edges again. Hattie stepped onto the porch. The air cut clean. Cold, but honest. She looked out over the land. The fence line showed in places. The path toward Dry Hollow was still buried, but she could see where it would be. She stayed there longer than needed. The cabin behind her felt too full of something that wasn't there anymore. Inside, the fire had burned down to coals. She moved through the room without thinking, straightened the blanket on the bed, washed the cup he had used, set it upside down beside the other. Her hand brushed the small wooden horseshoe still resting on the table. She picked it up again, turned it once, then set it in the drawer, closed it. That should have been enough. It wasn't. By the 3rd day, she made the walk into Dry Hollow. The road was a slow thing. Snow packed hard under her boots, then gave in patches. The wind had carved ridges across the open ground. It took her near 2 hours where it should have taken 1. The town looked the same. Low buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, a few horses tied along the rail outside Miller's store. Still, something shifted when she stepped onto the boardwalk. It wasn't loud, just a pause. A man near the hitching post stopped mid-sentence. 2 women by the window lowered their voices, then didn't bother raising them again. Hattie kept walking. Inside the store, the bell above the door gave its usual dull ring. Miller nodded from behind the counter. Road clear enough? Clear enough. She set her list down. Flour, salt, coffee, a small sack of beans. He filled it without much talk. Behind her, voices carried just enough. Tracks up near her place last week. Horse too. Big one. Didn't figure she'd... The rest dropped lower. Hattie didn't turn. She counted coins onto the counter. Exact. No change needed. When she stepped back outside, the cold hit harder than before. A man stood near the edge of the boardwalk. Silas Boone. Tall, coat too fine for the weather, gloves tucked into his belt like he didn't need them. He watched her the way a man watches land he's already decided belongs to him. "Miss Brooks," he said. She kept her hands on the sack she carried. "Mr. Boone." He stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to be heard without raising his voice. "Heard you had company." She shifted the weight of the sack. "Storm brings trouble to every door. Not every door opens." She met his eyes then, held them. Mine did. A faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Not warm. I've been meaning to talk to you about that place of yours." "No need. I think there is." He glanced past her, out toward the open land. "You're sitting on good ground. Shame to see it wasted." "It's not wasted. Living alone like that?" He shook his head once. "Winter like this, it's only a matter of time." Hattie said nothing. He took that as room to continue. "I could make you an offer. Fair one. You'd have money in your pocket. A room in town, maybe. Something easier." She adjusted her grip on the sack. "I'm not selling." His eyes stayed on her, weighing. "You might not have much say in that before long." The words sat there, not loud, not angry, just placed. Hattie didn't answer. After a moment, he tipped his head slightly and stepped aside. "Think on it," he said. She walked past him without looking back. The road home felt longer. By the time she reached the cabin, the light had gone thin again. The sky held that pale color that meant another cold night. She set the sack on the table, didn't unpack it right away, just stood there. The room was quiet, the same as it had been before. Only now, the quiet pressed. She moved to the stove, stirred the fire back to life. The kettle went on. The motions were right, familiar. Still, something missed its place. Her eyes drifted to the drawer. She stood there a long time before crossing the room, pulled it open. The small wooden horseshoe lay where she had left it. She picked it up, ran her thumb along the rough edge. The mark of a knife still showed where it had been shaped. Careful work, done without hurry. She closed her hand around it. That night, she didn't sew, didn't read, sat in the chair by the fire and listened to the cabin breathe. After a while, she rose, crossed to the shelf above the hearth. The photograph still stood there. Dust along the frame. She reached up, hesitated, then took it down. Wiped the glass with the edge of her sleeve, looked at it for a long moment, then set it back. Not in the same place, slightly to the side. It was a small thing, but it changed the line of the shelf. Hattie stepped back. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind had gone still. Inside, she opened the drawer once more, took the wooden piece out. This time, she didn't put it away. She carried it with her when she moved, held it when she stood at the door. When she stepped out onto the porch, the night air caught in her chest. The land stretched wide and empty under a thin sky. She looked out toward the buried road, toward where it led. Her hand tightened slightly around the carved wood. She stood there until the cold worked its way through her boots. Then she turned back inside, but not before looking once more at the path she had walked alone for years, as if measuring it, as if wondering how far it really went. Morning came clear, the kind of sky that made everything look closer than it was. The snow had settled into a hard crust. The path toward Dry Hollow showed in a faint line, pressed down by old tracks and wind. Hattie stood in the doorway a long time before stepping back inside. The cabin held its usual shape: table, stove, bed, the same four walls that had carried her through winters that felt longer than they were. She moved slowly, not like before, not just going through what needed doing. She opened the small trunk at the foot of the bed, folded two dresses, the thicker one for travel, wrapped a shawl tight and set it on top. Her sewing kit went in last, the needles tucked into cloth so they wouldn't rattle. She paused at the shelf. Her hand hovered over the photograph. Then she took it down, wiped it once more, though it was already clean. For a moment, she held it against her chest, then placed it carefully in the trunk. Not hidden, not buried, just carried. The wooden horseshoe sat on the table. She picked it up and slipped it into her coat pocket. The cabin felt smaller after that, or maybe she had just seen how much space it held. By noon, she had the door closed and locked behind her. She didn't look back. The road was rough going at first. Snow broke under her boots, then held. The wind had carved long drifts along the fence line. She walked steady, keeping to the path she knew by memory more than sight. A wagon passed her near the ridge, heading west. The driver slowed. "You headed far?" "Far enough." He nodded like that made sense. "Climb up then. Road's worse past the creek." She did. Sat on a sack of feed, hands folded in her lap, as the wagon rolled on. The land opened as they moved south, then bent toward Wyoming. Fences grew fewer. The sky stretched wider. By the second day, the snow thinned, showing patches of dry grass beneath. She didn't ask for directions, just followed what she remembered of what he had said, and what the land itself offered. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun had dropped low. Dust hung in the air where the ground had thawed. Horses moved in a wide circle, guided by a man at the center. She stopped at the edge of the fence, watched. He moved the way she remembered, not hurried, not harsh, just steady. One of the horses broke line. He turned, cut it off clean, brought it back without raising his voice. Then he saw her. It took a second, maybe less. He went still. The horse he held shifted under his hand, but he didn't notice. Hattie didn't move either. The distance between them wasn't far. Still, it felt like more. He let the reins drop, took a step forward, stopped, like he wasn't sure he had the right. She stepped through the gate, closed it behind her, walked toward him, slow and even. When she was close enough, she stopped. "I'm not here because I need saving," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "I'm here because I chose this." The words settled between them. He searched her face like he was looking for something that might tell him he'd heard wrong. "You shouldn't have had to come," he said quietly. "I didn't have to." That was the difference, and he nodded once, didn't reach for her, just stood there, waiting. Hattie felt it then, the space between them, not empty, open. She took the last step, closed it herself. His hand lifted, slow, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't. Their hands met, simple, steady. Behind them, a horse snorted and stamped the ground. From the road, a rider approached fast. Silas Boone. Dust trailing behind him, coat flaring in the wind. He pulled up hard at the fence, eyes fixed on Hattie. "You don't belong out here," he called. Hattie didn't turn right away. Luke shifted, stepping slightly in front of her, not blocking her view, just there. She stepped around him, faced Silas. "That land's still yours," he said, "and you walked off it." She held his gaze. "That land was never my life," she said. Silas studied her a moment longer, then looked past her, at Luke, at the horses, at the open stretch of land. Something in his expression shifted. Not understanding. Just acceptance that he wasn't going to change it. He turned his horse without another word. Rode off the way he came. The dust settled behind him. Hattie stood there until he was gone, then turned back. Luke hadn't moved. "You sure about this?" he asked. She looked past him, at the wide ground, the low buildings, the fences that didn't feel like walls, then back at him. Yes, that was enough. The sun dipped lower, the air cooled. Somewhere behind them, a gate creaked, and one of the hands called out about feed. Luke picked up the reins again. "Come on," he said, not leading, just walking. She fell into step beside him. No promises spoken, no need. The land stretched ahead, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to live in. If you stood where she stood, with the wind at your back and a life behind you that never quite let go, would you have walked forward? Or would you have stayed where it was quiet, even if that quiet slowly took everything from you? Some people think healing is loud, that it comes with big moments, clear signs, or a sudden kind of peace. But most times, it's quieter than that. It's a hand you don't pull away from, a step you take without knowing what waits ahead. It's choosing to live, even when part of you is still looking back. Hattie didn't forget what she lost. She carried it with her, but she stopped letting it decide how far she could go. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the storm, not the loneliness, but the moment she chose something more than just getting through another day. If this story found you tonight, I'd like to hear where you're listening from, and whether you've ever had to make a choice like that. There are more stories like this waiting just down the trail. Stories about second chances, about quiet courage, about hearts that find their way back to life when they least expect it. If you feel like walking a little farther with me, I'll be right here.